Please make sure that you've grabbed a copy of today's bulletin, this week's bulletin, and review the prayer requests as well as the announcements of upcoming events. Still going on this week, a very active week, busy week. Susan asked me to let everyone know that the sign-up sheet for Meals on Wheels is out on the table in the office lobby. So if you would like to sign up to bring food for this InReach ministry, then you're strongly encouraged to do that. And if you can't bring food but would like to help deliver food, then be here at the building Thursday morning at 10 a.m. to participate in that great ministry. Also, I was asked to announce, mark your calendars, we will be having as far as I know, our first annual ministry fair on September 25th. Immediately following our worship service, we'll have a fellowship meal and then have the deacons explain, or I don't know if they're going to have trifold science fair boards, but they will be there to explain what ministry they're involved in and to hopefully sign individuals up to assist in those ministries. So mark your calendars. That will be on September 25th, Sunday, September 25th, immediately following our worship service. Now I'd like to direct you to the prayer requests on page 2. Just make sure you review all of those sometime today and have a couple of additions. Richie has asked us to pray for his brother Kevin, who will be undergoing some unspecified medical tests here in the immediate future, and also pray for Judy, his wife, who is just not doing well, according to what Richie said. Are there any additions to our prayer list? Prayers of Thanksgiving. Prayer of Thanksgiving, Ashton made it successfully to Europe and is already posting pictures on social media of her adventure. So continue to pray for her while she's away for a semester. Pray for Brian and Heather while she's away for a semester, and pray for a good time spent in Europe studying. Any prayers for healing or prayers for comfort? If not, we'll go ahead and ask Tim Ellis if he would guide our minds in prayer as we prepare to enter our class this morning.
Pray that our hearts and our minds may be turned to you and the glorious gifts that you have given to us. The fact that you were willing to send your Son to this earth, that he took upon himself our sins, that he has returned to you and acts as our intercessor today. Thank you for that sacrifice, for the willingness to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. We thank you for the blessed assurance that is ours, that if we follow your will and your word, that one day we will be with you as well. We thank you for this congregation, and each of us has our own different struggles from time to time, and we realize that we have those who need you at this time. For those who have undergone treatments for Phyllis Holly, for Polly Toombs, for Jen Severino, and for Luke Bailey. We ask your blessings upon them. We also ask your blessings upon both Kevin and Judy Bell at this time and their procedures and issues that they're facing as well, that you guide those who are administering to them. We are especially mindful of Nathan and Hannah and the loss of their son. Pray that you would comfort them, for the family of Tex Cameron as well. We ask and realize that only through you sometimes can we make it. We thank you for the power of prayer, and for those who have been through a time in our lives where we understand that we alone are insufficient, that it's only through your guidance and through your will in our lives that we have the answer and that we have the ability to overcome some of our issues. We pray that you would forgive us wherein we fail you, and help us always to strive to be the best that we can be in this life. We ask your blessings upon the Firegrass Christian has once again thank you for the success. We pray that you would be with the students and the teachers, the staff, and the parents, that you would guide them and give them an outcome that would strengthen each of them in this coming year. We thank you now for the leadership of this congregation, for the elders. We wish upon them your guidance, your wisdom, and help us to follow their decisions and support the ideas and the reasons behind their ideas so that this congregation will grow. We thank you once again for our preachers, for Caleb, for Joey, for their families, and the work that goes on here. Sometimes behind the scenes, we don't ever realize exactly what all everybody's involved in. But help us each to be involved and strengthen us. Thank you now for our time of worship. These prayers we're asking your son's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Tim. Continuing our study of basic combat training for spiritual warfare, this is the penultimate class today, coming to the end of our quarter and the end of our study on comparing our lives today as Christians to being Christian soldiers, as found over in 2 Timothy 2. So we're going to be talking about victory today. Any fans of football in here? One hand, two hands? Really? I don't believe that. So the football season has begun in high school. Any Wildcat fans in here? Pretty significant event Friday night, the season opener against Bay High. We won. Ben Blackman led our team to a victory. Anyone know the score? You're not fans. You claim to be fans. You hold your hand up, but 41-7 against the Bay High Tornadoes, right? And that's a pretty big point differential, right? Another question: how many of you like to win? How many Lions do we have in here? If you were here yesterday for our yeah, I know, Richard. If you were here yesterday for our teachers training, we took a personality test and we were all divided up into different categories based on our personality type. And the first group were the Lions. And one of the characteristics of Lions is that they're highly competitive, right? So we've got some Lions in here. We've got some Lambs in here. That wasn't one of the categories, but so got some hands. Everybody, people like to win. How many people like to lose? How many people set out playing a game with the intention to lose? Now, I understand if you're parents and have young kids, that's a different paradigm, because you've got to kind of begin to nurture their self-esteem a little bit, begin to teach them the importance of playing by the rules. And, I don't play chess anymore because I always lost, and I don't like to lose. So anyway, today we're going to be talking about victory, right? This is really the last session that we'll have where we'll talk about. Does everybody have a student handout, by the way? They were in the lobby. Anyone need one? We can get one of the ushers to bring them in. Okay, so we've covered a great deal of territory, talking about the organization and leadership of the kingdom, the church, communication, the equipment that we have, both offensive and defensive operations. We studied threat tactics, how our adversary, Satan, tries to prevent us from reaching the objective. And throughout this class, we've talked about our objective as Christians. And what is our twofold objective? Come on, y'all. Spread the gospel, so expand the borders of the kingdom, right? And that implies some action on our part, not just sitting back in the defensive, but going out and doing something. And seek and save the lost. Okay, that's it. But what is our strategic objective? Get ourselves and as many people to heaven as we can. The objective is heaven, right? If you don't keep your mind focused on the objective, can you share the gospel? Can you bring souls to salvation absent the promise of heaven, the hope and the promise of heaven? I would say no. I would say, that's kind of the integral part. And we've talked about how, many young Christians, I can't say many young Christians myself, I knew that I was a sinner, and I knew that I didn't want to go to hell, right? So I probably became a Christian more out of the fear of hell and the desire to be in heaven with my family and with God and with Christ Jesus than I did at that young age, realizing that the benefits of being a Christian extend well beyond just going to heaven. Heaven's a wonderful place. We want to get there, but this is a little piece of heaven that we're participating in this morning, right? We're worshiping God. We're with our brothers and sisters. It's an opportunity to commune with God, with the Holy Spirit. Heaven is our objective. How would you define, what is victory? Because, if we're going to talk about victory, we need to define our terms, right? What is victory? Victory, right? Conquering your adversary, Melody. Accomplishing your objective. Okay. So what is spiritual victory? Making it to the objective. We've talked, I know this has come up in our discussion pretty regularly, periodically throughout this series of lessons, but we know that as long as we wear the uniform, it's kind of like the Allies at the close, after the successful landing in Normandy in June of 1944, the outcome of the war was pretty much determined, right? Germany just could not keep up with our ability to generate forces, both equipment and manpower. We could make them faster in the American heartland than the Germans could blow it up. So it was kind of a fait accompli. It was, the end of the war, it was not a question of if, it was a question of when and where, right? So our victory of spiritual warfare is secured, not just at the strategic level, as long as we remain faithful, but even at the day-to-day tactical level, right? It's, we've talked about this, when we were talking about Satan, James 4:7. How do we defeat Satan on a daily basis? We resist him. That's a specified task when we talk about the military construct. That's a specified task, but there's a lot of implied tasks associated with resisting Satan. And what are some of those implied tasks? Someone other than answering all the questions. He's carrying this class for you. No, you're good, Richard. You have to understand. You have to study, Brian said, right? And even with that, there's some implied tasks along with that. Study what? Study the Scripture, right? And understand the intent, the commanders, and why he wants us to save others and how he wants us to get to the objective, right?
Aware of this temptation is coming my way. I need to, or I know this is a weakness for me.
During pre-combat inspections before leaving the wire in Iraq, one of the things we always told our soldiers was complacency kills. Complacency kills. Guess what? Spiritual complacency also kills. But whereas the death that occurs in a combat zone in the physical world is temporal, it only happens once, and then one and done. Spiritual death has eternal implications, right? Just knowing that, I want to be on the winning team, right? I say I realize the benefits of being a Christian today, but the reality is there's still that fear and the desire not to go to hell and to be in heaven with God, with my brothers and sisters, and with my family members and friends. So, daily battles. What about an adversity? Romans 8:31 through 39. Who can kind of summarize that verse? Come on, y'all. It's like y'all didn't even get ready for this class. No, Richard, you can talk. No, I want you to talk. I'm going to give you a bread X if you don't talk. If you're the only one that talks, this is just going to be a conversation between me and you, Richard. So what is Romans 8, 31 through 39? What's the gist of that? If God is for us, who can be against us? Absolutely. And also, what else? We are not just conquerors. I mean, this is a great example. So, Enterprise High School Wildcats dominated the gridiron on Friday night, 41-7. It was almost a blowout, right? Well, it was a blowout. It was almost a shutout. And that's great. That's a W in the win column. But guess what? That's the season opener. So what does that mean? You've got a long ways to go, right? Does that have a spiritual application? We have to, as Melody said, we have to be aware constantly about Satan's nefarious means of trying to prevent us. Sometimes he's trying to prevent us from getting to heaven, and sometimes he's just trying to slow us down. Who remembers what Tanglefoot is? Since I'm apparently the only one that's ever heard that. I'm an old soldier, right? Tanglefoot is designed to do what? Trip you up, slow you down, so that the enemy can do what? Kill you more easily. Does Satan try to slow us down? Does he try to discourage us from keeping our eyes on the prize, from moving toward the objective? If there's a chink in your armor, he's going to find it. So there's, the idea with that's a great point, Richard. The idea with a chink in your armor is what? He knows our weaknesses, but shouldn't we also know our weaknesses? If you're wearing the armor of God and you know you have a particular weakness, what are you going to do? Or if you're wearing any armor, if you're in a duel, if you're a gladiator, and you know there's a problem with your protection, what are you going to do? You're going to try to do something that will keep that chink out of the enemy's line of sight or out of the enemy's ability to reach it, right? We all have weaknesses, right? The armor of God is perfect, but we may not put it on right every time we leave to go outside the wire, right?
One of the other things is I think Satan's really good about convincing us that the threat is really low and we don't need the armor.
Absolutely. We're spending a great deal of time in the Army right now preparing for large-scale combat operations like we fought in World War II, like we fought in Korean War, because we've been fighting counterinsurgencies for a long time. Satan's not going to send an army of demons against us, something that's going to be obvious. He's going to be like an insurgent, right, who wears just regular clothes, sneaks around, hides, and attacks at the greatest opportunity to inflict the highest amount of harm without affecting, the Arabic idea of warfare is very consistent with the adage, the dog that bites, man, I must be old. The dog that bites and runs away, y'all have never heard this? Lives to fight another day. Thank you, Amy. She gets a green star or a red star. The dog that bites and runs away lives to fight another day. So Satan, if we resist him, what does it say over in James? He's going to flee from us, but that only means that he's still on the battlefield and he's going to continue to look for that weakness and he's going to continue to press that vulnerability. And once we secure that area, that chink in the armor, he's going to be looking for more vulnerabilities, right? So, Romans 8, we are more than conquerors through the love of Christ. Yes, Lori?
That James 4:7 starts out with submitting yourselves to God. So He's our lead, our God, and so as long as we do that and everything else.
And even that kind of has a military connotation, right? God has given us our marching orders contained in His Word, and we're to submit to those, right? We're not to try to come up with a better way. It's pretty clear. It's pretty simple operation plan, right? We're not. Melody and I were talking this past week how the paradox of the simplicity of the gospel, but the difficulty of following through that simplicity. I mean, Islam, you don't have to conduct the Hajj to Mecca, but it increases your stature if you have actually been a pilgrim to Mecca, right? You're absolutely right, Richard. And we can have a class on Islam, and we've done that in the past, but another class. So we've got assurance in our daily battles. We've got assurance during adversity when He's just continuing to pick away at us, and it's, I like that. It's very explicit in Romans that He's not just saying we're conquerors. He's not saying you won the first game. He's saying through the love of Christ, we are more than conquerors. And that word hupernikeo in the Greek basically means hyper conquerors, right? We are moving at a speed and intensity that our adversaries can't compete with, right? We talk about in the military disciplined initiative, taking advantage of situations to advance the commander's intent. We have to have disciplined initiative. We have to be proactive about our defense against Satan, but also how we share the gospel. And then Revelation 2:10, the conclusion of that verse says what? Be faithful until death, and I will give you the crown of life. And as you see on your student handout, that word there is Stephanos, which is literally a victor's crown. And some translations say the victor's crown. And the victor's crown is not the same as diadema, that word that's written on your student handout. It's not the same. One is the crown that you get. One is the national championship trophy that currently my Georgia Bulldogs have. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that, was I? One is a recognition for a job well done. The other is the crown of authority that the king wears. The diadem is the crown of authority. So, it's like running. It's like running the glow run on Fort Rucker a couple of weekends ago, and the fact that everybody that crosses the finish line gets that medal that says you've completed the race. Not everybody gets first place, but everyone is recognized that they did what it was needed to get across the finish line. And we're moderately fast, so we came in fairly early in the run, but and some people were struggling, some people were walking, some people were just having a difficulty. But if they crossed the line, they were recognized as finishers. We're not going to all have the same spiritual race. There are going to be some people in the leader of the pack, and there are going to be some people that are just going to make it by the something. They're just going to make it. And really, when we talk about eternity, it doesn't matter. It matters how we get there. It doesn't matter when we get there. And it doesn't matter, whether we're running, walking, or crawling, as long as we cross the finish line. Nakia, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying through experience, and just wanted to say as well that we have to be careful how we compare our spiritual races, if you will, or not even to compare them, because
as you were saying, or as I was like thinking, you were saying is that like, you know, well, I'll do it this way. I used to be like an avid runner as well, and man, we had all kinds of people that were like, they ran all kinds of distances and everything, and I was training for my first marathon, and man, and I would just feel like, I would always use the word just, I only ran 3 miles today, or I only did this, or I just did it, but I finished standing up, you know, without a brace or without a scratch or anything like that, you know. And when it came time for, you know, that race to come, you know, it was the same celebration, it was the same accomplishment. Like, no lie, guys, like, for real, I was like 4 minutes before the cutoff, you know? But I finished, and just the training that went into it, that I could look back and say, I did it, you know? Like, with mishaps during the race, I kept going. You know, I had to call my mom, you know, and she can't
Hey, Mama.
at Mom 19, she couldn't,
She
you know?
could encourage you.
But she encouraged me, you know what I mean? So it's
I
just,
do know what you mean.
that's how it is, like, you know, with our spiritual race as well. It's never you only read a scripture or you only did this. You're trying, and guess what? You will build up.
And
you
the
know?
more you run, the more disciplined you become, but also the stronger you
That's
become.
right. You know, you have to show up. That thing that's going to make you successful in your spiritual life, in your physical life, whether you're training for a 5K, a 1 miler, a marathon, or an ultra. Showing up and going every day. That's
And training, preparing for that race.
Exactly.
There's so many, you know, I love that Paul uses the analogy of running. As long as you finish before the EMT ambulance at the very end that's going 5 miles an hour, as long as you finish before the EMT, not speaking from experience, but, and I like what you said, Nakia, because, yeah, we shouldn't compare ourselves to others in this race. And why is that? This race has already been won. Never forget that. You know, Christ exemplified what it means to run, to struggle through adversity all the way to the finish, right? He is now, he's on the objective. He's gotten there before we have, right? He's seated at the right hand of God. So don't compare ourselves to each other. Now, what I like is most organized races, half marathon, and marathon, probably not ultras, but they'll have pace setters. If you know that you run a certain speed in a race, there'll be somebody, sometimes they have balloons, sometimes they have little signs, and you can pick out someone that's going to, you know, kind of set a pace for you. They're not going to win you still have to run. They're not going to win the race for you, but guess what? They're going to be a source of motivation, and they're going to keep you moving toward the finish line. Don't follow a pace setter that goes off the track, right? Don't follow a pace setter that falls out in the first mile, because that's, you know, you got to keep, it's still your own race, but we can support each other. You know, Nakia talked about calling her mom for some, I had never thought about that. Sometimes I feel like, Mama, what have I gotten myself into? Yeah, powerful analogy there. So the crown of life, the victor's crown. So daily struggles through long-term adversity, and struggles through life to the finish line. What are the conditions that are placed on us in order to win that victor's crown? Submission, obedience, perseverance. I've just recently, because, you know, I like 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14 is one of my favorite passages about standing firm. In Ephesians 6, a number of times when it's talking about the armor of God, he says stand firm, I think 3 times in that passage. We've talked about the most important piece of Roman equipment in terms of standing firm, the caligatus, the boots, the hobnailed leather boots that the legionnaire wrote. The gospel of peace, the good news of peace, is what allows us to stand firm, what allows us to not just stand firm. We talked about the Roman method of warfare, right? How did they conquer all the known world at the time? One step at a time, right? Standing shoulder to shoulder, step, thrust, step, thrust, step, thrust. So we've got to, if we expect to get to the objective, we can't just sit back and wait to be transported there. We've got to be moving, and as we're moving, we're pushing back Satan, right, and his army, his adversaries, his very nefarious means of getting us. Now, and I don't know, I mean, these student handouts I made a long time ago, why did I not put 1 John 4 and 5 in here? Because this gives us the prescription for how we conquer this. 1 John 5, I think I said 4. 1 John 5, 4 and 5. For everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world. Now, it's very explicit in this passage. Our faith, which Christ's death is obviously a component of our faith, right? But, you know, if we want to, and the interesting thing here in the Greek is that verb overcomes is either saying is overcoming or, in some translation, has overcome, right? It doesn't say will overcome. It's either is overcoming or has overcome. So it's either present tense or past tense.
Make a great hymn.
Somebody should actually put some notes to that and sing a song, make it into a song. But that's that same word, nikeo, which is the Greek word for has overcome, the same word that's found there in more than conquerors. And it's talking, you know, the imagery that we miss here as 21st century Americans is that when someone is talking about victory in the Roman world, a synonym for that is triumph, and a triumph is an actual event. What is a triumph? I'm not talking about the motor. You took my joke, Richard. I'm not talking about the motorcycle. I'm not talking. A triumph is a victory parade, right? That acknowledge that's where the victor, where the emperor would place the crown on the victor's head. And I don't want to get too much into that analogy, but the reality is, you know, our victory, as far as God is concerned, our victory is a big event. He is waiting for us to reach the objective. He longs for us. And why is he in our corner? Why is he pulling for us? Because he loves us, right? We're his children. He wants his children to be with him. Why is Satan trying to prevent us? Is it because we've talked about this when we were talking about the adversary, Satanas? Why does he wants to be, he doesn't love us. He doesn't have our best interest at heart. He wants to stymie God's intent and God's purpose and God's plan for mankind. So what is heaven? What is heaven to you? And we've got Revelation 21:6, I think it is, through 22:9, or maybe I've inverted those numbers, but we've got a good description of it.
James, I have something that happened in our family that I want to say. We have a grandson that's in his 30s that is a juvenile renal diabetic. He has been since 1 year old. And one day, the first 3 years of his life, he struggled to live. And one day he asked his dad, he said, "Daddy, what is heaven like?" And Philip said, "Son, it's a beautiful place. It's filled with glory. All I know is what I can read about it. There's no sadness, no sickness, no death." And our 3-year-old at that time said, "Do you mean when I get to heaven, I won't be a diabetic?" And Philip said, "No." And he said, "Well, I'm ready to go right now."
Wow.
So, you know, we just hope after 30 years he continues to
Sure, sure. Great, great example.
Sounds like a wonderful place.
And you know, we think in terms of the prohibition of suffering and sorrow and pain. When we look at the actual physical description, you know, streets of gold and pearly gates and jasper and sardonyx and all these precious minerals. We have to understand that John, through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is describing something to us that's supernal, something that defies explanation. Our feeble minds can't grasp the glory of heaven. So he uses terms that we can wrap our heads around, but, you know, that sounds like a pretty cool place, but I don't even understand it. You know, I want to be there, but I don't understand it. Rachel?
I just had a thought when you were talking about that. I was making some notes and I was thinking, heaven's a place of completeness where you will have complete peace, complete health, complete joy, complete love. Everything here is in an imperfect state and it's incomplete. But there, everything will be made complete and whole.
And most importantly, it will complete our intended relationship with God. It will return us to a relationship like mankind had in the garden before. Through our own prideful will, we crashed the relationship. We are the ones that left God. God never left us. Right? Great point. Tim?
Stole my thunder.
I apologize.
I want to get back to paradise where, you know, man was separated from God. But in addition to that, you know, it said that God rested on the seventh day. I think, you know, just like you're in battle, you know, you want to get back to home and rest.
Sure.
And I believe that's, you know, what that also means is get back, you know, resting from all our, you know, trials and tribulations.
Great point, Tim. So Tim said that, you know, at some point when you've been in battle, you'll be taken out of the fight, and you'll have rest. That's what heaven is to us. That's the opportunity to we've completed. We fought the good fight. We've finished the course. We've kept the faith. You know, fighting and winning are contingent on keeping the faith. Go ahead, Billy.
I know we can't take all of this literally, but I was in a class one time with some young folks, and they were talking about what heaven would be like and wanting a description of it. And one of the people said, well, when we get there, I know that we're going to have a sitter because we're going to sit down with Abraham. Well, I don't think we're going to have a sitter.
That's good, Billy. Yeah, and we know from the description that it's a city four square, right? So if you haven't heard, when I make it, if I make it, and I plan to make it, we're all going to meet for a big pork barbecue fellowship in the southeast corner. I'll be in the southeast corner waving a big flag, maybe a Georgia Bulldog flag, depends on how. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Susan.
Said with family and friends, it's kind of like in the church. You know that when you walk in that church that people are not judging you. They love you. They know that you're not perfect, but they still love you. And it's going to be if you think the opposite way of what you would be like in hell and what kind of people you would be with, that is, of course, a reason to want to be in heaven with our Father.
Absolutely. And the love that we share here on earth in our little slice of heaven down here, it's not just love and not judging, but it's doing what? It's bearing each other's burdens. And we had a really good discussion at the men's Bible study last week about bearing one another's burdens from a kind of military perspective. And I'll share that with y'all sometime in the future. Why is our objective so important? 4 things here, right? That's where we hold our citizenship, right? And at various times in the Army, since I've been in the Army, you know, you had to be an American citizen to participate. Well, you know, spiritually, when we put on Christ in immersion, we become citizens of his kingdom. We're not just citizens of the kingdom, but what? Adopted sons, adopted children, right? What about Matthew 6? What does that say? Lay not for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust do canker, do poison, do corrode your treasures, but lay up for yourself treasure in heaven, right? For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also, right? Paul?
You said citizens, I said you didn't hear, we're heirs.
Absolutely.
To the kingdom. When we are in Christ, we become part of him, his body. And something else I wanted to iterate is that, as Nikhil was saying, you know, part of the race is suiting up and showing up. When you put on your faith and carry yourself, you run that race in faith. And in our Christian life, as we go through struggles and strife, there's that song, you know, what doesn't kill us, make us stronger. We're going, and in the Army, we're, you know, no pain, no gain. You may not win the race coming first, but if you finish the race, whether you're 100, you're still in that, your faith is strong, you're still have fought the battle.
Sure. And I like the point that you made, Paul, about you got to suit up and you got to run to get the medal at the end, right? There are people I've heard of that register for races and get the T-shirt, but then for whatever reason they don't run the race. They've got the T-shirt. They look like a runner. They look like a racer. They you know, they're a poser, but they don't have the medal that comes from the end, that comes from actually putting in the hard work. I think we can all kind of see that spiritual application. If we want to win the race, we got to run the race, right? So the next verses, heaven has been prepared for us by Christ. There in John, you know, I go to prepare a place for you. And then in Hebrews, it said that God has prepared heaven for us, right? So it's ready. We've got a room waiting for us. Like the forgiving father over in Luke 15 and his prodigal son, God is looking for us to come up that path to heaven, right? And, you know, I don't want to press the analogy too far, but, you know, imagine what it's going to be like when we're getting to heaven and God runs out to welcome us. Just think about that for a minute. So it's prepared for us, and then 2 Corinthians 5:11 says what? We're prepared for it. God has been taking the time to train us, to equip us, to give us the right plan, to surround us by people who are going to help us get there. He is preparing us for this battle, to win this battle. And, you know, what will we do once we get there? We'll do what we do on Sunday mornings. We'll be in the presence of God, in his actual presence. We'll be worshiping him. We'll be praising him, right? So, what's the takeaway from today's lesson? How do we take the idea of victory and transpose it into our life so it actually promotes a change in our behavior, a change in our action? Live for Jesus every day. Fight the fight. Finish the course. Keep the faith. Live victoriously. Live understanding that as long as we maintain faith and stand firm in what God has asked us to do, we're already victors. We're more than conquerors. There's a crown in heaven, a victor's crown in heaven with my name on it, that's just waiting to be presented to me when I get there. And guess what? God is faithful. It depends solely on me focusing on what I need to do every day to resist the Satan, to persevere through adversity, and to live a life. I like the term there, be faithful unto death. That is akri akris, which means up until the time of your death, but it also has the connotation of up to the place of death, right? So this links us to success in both space and time. It's kind of almost quantum in its implications. But we don't know when or where we will breathe our last. But guess what? Receiving that crown is contingent on us keeping the faith and continuing to press on. Any last comments? I know that was the second bell. So next week, we're going to be kind of having an after-action review. We've covered a great deal of territory in the past 12 lessons. So come in ready to talk about what we need to do better as a congregation in terms of leadership, communication, fighting the enemy, equipage, and also, more personally, be reflecting on what you can sustain in your life, what the good things are you're doing, but also what you can do to be a better soldier of Christ. Thank you.